All right, something new today. It'll be fun. First guest. Let's see how it goes. We'll get started here in just a minute or two. Greetings, programs. This is Let's Code a Full 90, where we go in code for an hour and a half, try to make the world a little bit of a better place. This week we've got something a little bit different. I'm Rob Menching, and we have a guest today. I would like to introduce Tim Heuer. Tim and I don't think we ever worked together at Microsoft, but we ran into each other a lot. And he had a problem on Twitter and said, hey, can anybody help? And then he tagged me because, well, it's setup related. And now we've ended up here where we're going to take apart one of his old projects, I think, and put it back together. I actually have no idea what this thing does, but the nice thing about being a setup developer is that I don't really care. It all just has to install correctly. So Tim's here to give a little bit of the history of, so I can ask questions of why does it do this? What does it need to do? And is it looking like it's correct in the end? And we'll have a good time. So anyway, Tim, why don't you take a quick second and just say hi, introduce yourself, and then we'll jump right into the code.
Hello, everybody. Yes, I am Tim. And yeah, I think we actually did work together a little bit at the beginning of like Win 8, I want to say, on some tools and stuff like that. So, but yeah, Rob's been a good colleague. And so a little bit of history about this is I was dusting off the old blog post on this as well. So it was like 2006 was when I introduced this particular project, and it wasn't a person on GitHub. I think it was like, maybe I put some things on Codeplex or something like that, but in the end I had created this project, which essentially is called a preview handler, which allows for Windows, either in Outlook or in Windows Explorer, for you to select a file, and then it actually shows a document preview. So sometimes even images is a good example of that. That's actually technically a preview handler as well. But at the time there was nothing for like things like PDF. And then for my world, I was like, oh, it would be cool because people were emailing like C# files or XML files, and it'd be cool to rather than double click and open this full editor, I could just select the file and see this preview. So that's what the project does, and it does require some Windows specific installation things at the time. There's probably newer ways to do it, but this particular project does it that way.
All right.
But it is old.
It is old. I think that's kind of distinguishing factor here. All right.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. What that window is. All right. There we go. Okay. So Tim pointed me at the GitHub repository for this code, and an old Install Shield Lite project that went with it. And I don't have that installed, and I'm not particularly interested in installing it, but he did send me the MSI, so I figured we could kind of walk our way around going, all right, if you were to have a project and you're starting from scratch with maybe just your MSI left over, what are the kind of things you could do? So that's what we're going to go jump into now. And Tim, hopefully you can just jump in and say, hey, no, I did that for the first part. Or I did that for an actual reason. So let me open up the project real quick. I don't think this is going to help us. We're not going to spend much time in here to start. In the Wix code. All right, let's go. Let's code, Tim Heuer, and code handler. Oh, I didn't hit Control Shift. Oh, open a project. There we go. Let's try it again. Let's code, Tim Heuer. I can't tell you how many times I kept writing Time Heuer. It was very weird. Do you have the same problem?
I do the same thing for myself as well.
So there's some sort of thing there. As promised, I don't have the install shield project, so... Oh, did I hit cancel? Of course I did. Please? Yes? This one? Okay. Open the project. That's fine. Yeah, I don't care. Interesting. You can see one of my tests that I did. I thought I cleaned everything out before I got going, but all right. So that's our solution. Oh, that's not found either. Yeah. All right, Tim. So you had it named Code Preview Handler Setup. Do you want it to say that name? It's a fine name. The important part is not to call it setup.exe because you get all these strange, well, not strange, you get all these very interesting hooks from Windows into your exe if you're called setup.exe for backwards compatibility. You don't want that. So nobody should name their setup.exe anymore. In fact, the Wix toolset will tell you that. We're building an MSI, so it's going to be a lot less of an issue. But if you're fine with that name, that's fine. All right. So we're going to have to move it out of the way, though, to put the other one in. So I'm going to do that real quick here. Just move the Code Preview Handler setup project to Code Preview Handler setup project. We'll just call it old, just so we don't lose it for now. Not too worried about it. And then I'm going to delete it out of here because it will be in our way. It's incompatible removed. That's fine. It's incompatible. Okay. So, you know what? Let's go ahead and give ourselves a Wix project. Now, you did an interesting thing. You actually nested your setup project inside your CS code. Normally, I see a solution at the root with then the CS proj and the setup proj next to each other. It's your call. I can do it the way you had it before.
No, I think that, that was a byproduct of me like just debugging the DLL itself and then being like, oh, I should distribute this, right click, add project, and then just, followed all the defaults, which was a bad idea.
Well, no, it's honestly a personal preference. I don't know that there's really either way. It's unusual to have a nested project on a project.
I would agree. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's not do that.
Okay. Because the one thing I would warn against it, you're already on board, but for other people that are thinking, no, I'd leave it the way it is. In the future, I don't know if you're migrating this to newer C# and whatnot, but as you do that, then the project system, the new project files do globbing, so they'd be like, hey, take every C# file from here and go down and add that. So when you have nested projects, they can start interacting in very interesting ways. So we don't want that. All right, so I'm then going to create the code handler project here. Let me get this report out of my way. Okay, and see, there we go. Make this a bit bigger. All right. Oh, I accidentally opened myself on YouTube and now I'm getting a reverb. All right. Where is it? There it is. There we go. Okay. It's weird enough hearing myself in my own headphones. It's even worse hearing myself through my headphones, then out through the internet, and then back in through my headphones back to me. That is not a thing. All right, we are going to go add a new project. I already have the Visual Studio extension for Wix in here, and you can see I use these things, so it's actually my start project, at least here. So we're going to put it in Tim Heuer right next to Code Preview Handler, right? Guess I didn't have to rename it if I'm going to put it up here. And you wanted to call it setup. And we're creating an MSI project. So yay, go do your thing, Visual Studio and extension. And for some reason, the template starts with tabs. We're going to go with spaces today. All right. So there's a lot of stuff in here. And every time I see a Wix 3 template, it makes me cry a little bit because there's so much more stuff in it than what is necessary in Wix 4. And I would love to put you on Wix 4. And maybe we'll do that in the future just for fun. But right now, if you want this working, I can't say, oh yeah, let's put you on Wix 4. So we'll do this. It's pulled in a whole bunch of things. I'm going to go to your old code and pull the things out of, pull stuff out of that. And then to map these different things, like what you have for manufacturer. I don't actually need to put all those in here. And then we'll come back. All right. So this is the raw template from Wix. This is not what Tim needs. I just want to do one more thing and add a reference to the other project to make sure that my build order is correct. There we go. So that'll solve that problem. All right, that's most of the project. Now we're going to grab, I think I left the MSI here. Okay. And did I put dark on the, I think I put Wix on the command line in this prompt. Let's see. Yes, okay. So I did a add path. I added the path to C colon program files x86. Wix toolset, we're using Wix 3.11, the latest that's available, and the latest that's stable. And then in bin is where all the XEs and things like that. So I added that to my path just to make my life a little easier for this instead of typing those big long things. Eventually I'll be MS build and we won't have to worry about that. So dark is the decompiler. Where are we at here? I'm gonna make this a little wider because that wrap is pretty annoying. All right, so we're gonna dark this code setup MSI, and I don't know, foo.wxs, it doesn't matter. We're basically just going to dump it and look at this code. We're not going to keep a lot of it. Sometimes it'd be nice if you could, but it never really works out in the end. Then I'm going to do -x just to get all the files out of it in case we need to pull them out. But I think we're going to try to build most of them in here, so we won't need these in the end. But if we do, we'll have them. So we'll just let dark do its thing. And it tells us a bunch of warnings that essentially saying that this, let's see, so there's this custom table that came from whatever you're using before that we don't know what it is here. The advertised UI sequence is not supported because it's been deprecated by the installer team. So this MSI was adding tables that have been deprecated. You had some merge modules in here. That's interesting. Or they were empty. I guess we'll find out. The patch is only for patches. And this. So basically what this is saying is that your tool was creating these things and putting these tables in here, and they're not necessary. Here, let me, I think I have Orca in the past. So Orca is a table editor for the install. It's basically a binary viewer of the MSI. I probably could have started here. I can see Tim over here on my corner of my eye. I have him pulled in through Skype, and he can see him leaning into the window. So
yeah, exactly.
He's like, "This is awesome." All right. So when I see this stuff over here on the left, this many tables, it usually means it was not built with Wix, because in Wix we optimize the MSI as much as possible and minimize the amount of stuff that we put in to only what you need. Is kind of a primary goal at the top. And you can see here you have this empty table, and you have this admin execute table and admin UI sequence table. So this would be if you want to lay out your MSI onto an admin share, so it could then be deployed through group policy, things like that.
I see.
Advertised execute sequence is another part of that. You could then advertise it to users. So you could say, I've laid it on this network share, and then you go into group policy and you're like, advertise this to users such that if they click on a shortcut or activate it through COM, which is a really sketchy way to do it, whatever, then you'll see the install will just happen. And this was a big deal when disk space was a problem on workstations. It's a lot less of a thing now. Advertised UI sequence isn't a thing, and that's what that thing was telling us, so this should not be here. You don't have app ID, you're not using app search, and you're not using a bunch of these. You have some binary stuff. All right, I'm not gonna go through all these, but you can see you have a lot of tables in here.
So a lot of wasted space, a lot of things that we're doing nothing, right?
Yeah, it's like leaving code that you don't need, or boilerplate. It's like getting a template from somebody and then not deleting all the stuff that you didn't need. The 90s, yeah. Bob's saying, he's like, man, the 90s were crazy. I was like, yeah, it is kind of the old way. You also have a number of custom actions. I could do this in the Wix code too, but here's a good way. Goal of custom actions is to not have any, generally. So you should minimize the number of custom actions you have. And this one makes me really sad because install utils are particularly non-ideal way to write custom actions, although they are a highly promoted one by the Visual Studio team because that's what the Visual Studio installer could handle. But we'll talk about what this install util is doing in depth because I think that's where we're going to spend most of our time in the end.
I feel like that is the thing that was doing the COM registration, right?
You are exactly correct.
Yeah.
And there's no reason to execute code to register COM because it's just writing registry keys.
Yeah.
And the Windows installer is extremely good at writing registry keys and tracking them and rolling them back and dealing with if they're overlapping and repairing them, all those kinds of things. Where I expect this custom action is not good at doing half of those things. It's probably very good at writing them and removing them, but not so much good at dealing with any of the overlap you might have with them, reference counting, and certainly rolling them back. Or if you're halfway through an install and then you're like, oh no, let's go back to the previous version, you probably end up with some mishmash of whatever this custom action did. All those are reasons not to have custom actions. The other reason to not have custom actions that I kind of got by growing up through Office is that I kind of flippantly say that custom actions add about 0.1% failures to your install rate. Every custom action you add adds more chances of things failing. And so the more custom actions you have, the more chance you have of it just going awry on somebody's machine. Because the Windows installer tends to work really well on people's machines at this point. It's been out there a long time. It works very well. If you add custom actions, your code probably has not been as battle hardened and therefore is much more likely to fail. Plus the mechanisms that have to come into play to get your custom actions running just adds a lot more machinery that if you avoid it, you're better off, right? Now, I have a blog post from ancient times that basically said custom actions are admission of failure. It's either your failure or it's the Windows installer's failure.
Or the installer, yeah.
They didn't add the functionality that you needed. And when it's the Windows installer's failure, that's when you have to have a custom action. And the Wix toolset actually provides a fairly decent number of custom actions because the Windows installer did not provide everything. For example, I still don't understand why the Windows installer doesn't configure IIS for you. Like, it just should. It's part of the Windows. The Windows installer should configure IIS, but they don't. And so our custom actions exist to fill in that gap for configuring IIS, for example. Lots of things like that. Anyway, there's my spiel of why our goal will be to get rid of this custom actions. But be forewarned, that's going to be where we're going to have a lot of challenges. Now, one thing I should call out, these Type 51 custom actions aren't quite the same. These are essentially just setting variables within the MSI. So they're not really custom actions. They're more like assignment statements. And they should not fail. Take this value, assign this value to it, all within the Windows installer. They should not fail. So while they're called custom actions, they really should just be called assignment statements, and they're okay. There are ways to make decisions within your installer, conditions, things like that, to say, hey, if this has been true, because you can condition these things, then set this variable, which then can condition things later, and so on and so forth. You know, it's a bit of a way to inject a little bit of procedural logic into a declarative system. All right, Type 19s are also these are custom actions that essentially, if they fire, they fail your install with this message. That's what they exist. All right, so I spent a lot of time on custom actions because the goal is to not have any, and they are the place where you have the most problems, inevitably. And so I always stop and look at this for a while and decide where to go. It's also, if I'm looking to decide if I'm going to install something on my own machine, I sit here for a while and stare at this and try to decide if I like things or not. So let's see. Otherwise, we have like this is awesome. SFP catalog. Do you install any system file protected files on Windows ME?
That's all that it's for?
Yep.
Wow.
SFP. It's awesome. Good stuff. All right. You have a couple things. Do you install with the GAC?
No.
Okay. I'd have to look. Oh, yeah, no, you have file application here. So this isn't strictly necessary. This just creates more busy work within the Windows installer. You have to do this if you're putting assemblies into the GAC. You don't do this if you don't. Public key token. These are signed. Okay. Interesting. Okay.
Just strong name signed, right?
Strong name signed. Sorry, strong name signed. Yes. All right. Yeah. This shouldn't be here. Okay, cool. The rest of this is... There's a lot of stuff in here, but not. One of the things that is interesting about your install is that you don't have any shortcuts, which means this is not a user-facing application, which means we probably should have some registration, and we don't. And why don't we have registration? It's because we have custom actions that are doing it for us instead.
Right.
So the two major entry points, three major entry points that are most common is a shortcut for a user application, a service for people that are installing services, way more popular than they probably should be, and then the registry for hooking into Explorer, Com, all those other kinds of, Office, so and so, everybody, all that kind of stuff. So those are kind of the three big entry points into the world that I'm always looking for. And yours has none, which means that you have a custom action that's creating your entry points.
Now, at the time when I was doing this, would you said, Windows installer is really good at writing registry stuff. So in 2006, was that also a true statement? Or?
Oh yeah, it's been good since the beginning. I mean, so let's think about where the Windows installer started. The Windows installer started as the Office installer. Its primary goal was to put Office on the machine, because when Office was going to their customers and saying, hey, we just gave you Office 97, we're going to be very excited to give you the next version of Office. Their primary customers, their large customers, all said, no, it's too hard to install. We don't want another one. And Office said, wait, you don't want another one because we can't install it? And the answer is, yes, we don't want another one because it's too hard to install. So the Windows installer is born out of that, and tackled all of the problems or attempted to tackle all the problems of 1994 to 1997. That was the design place, if you put it, the time frame at which they were designing for things, so they were going to make sure they could install Office. Anything that Office uses works extremely well inside the Windows installer because it must. You just don't mess with a multi-billion-dollar product.
Right.
you just
and
don't.
Office may have a few registry keys. I'm not sure, but
a couple.
May.
A couple. Not as many as Visual Studio though.
That
Visual Studio is
good.
actually on Windows' list of. They've been getting better, but back a while ago they were on Windows' list as the application that would slow the boot of the operating system because they make the registry file too big. So big.
Oh wow.
You make the registry too big, it actually slows down your machine. That whole WinRot concept, some of it comes from way back there. So, and that's why a lot of Visual Studio started pulling a lot of their private COM registration out of that and leaving only the COM registration that is for public interfaces, which was the intent. The registry is for the public stuff, not for necessarily talking to yourself. Not that everybody got that memo, but that certainly was a way to go. Anyway.
Right.
So yeah, Office writes registry keys just fine. That said, you should write as few as you need to. 0 is probably too few for you.
Yeah.
In this case. All right, so that's a quick rundown. And again, notice I haven't even hit what what your application does, because I still don't care a lot. Oh, I should look at the file table. I skipped over the file table.
I was gonna say, what about the content?
I do look at the file table. I skipped over it only because I looked at it a little when I first got it, and I knew it was really small, and I was like, oh, okay, fine. I assume this is for the UI, but I don't know.
Installer UI, yeah.
Yeah, it's really strange to install your icon because that is actually stored usually in the icon file, in the icon table. So I don't know if you use this file on disk for something that you display.
I don't know. I don't use that or the first JPEG. Those were only used to customize the installer.
This also isn't used. This should live in your binary table and can be referenced by the UI, like in your possibly that. Anyway.
Yeah.
This is one of the things.
Hey, I was just clicking next on the wizard.
Absolutely. Rob. See, I don't fault you for that. If this is the what you're seeing is a little bit of difference in philosophy, and I am highly judgmental of philosophies that aren't let's get this down to the right thing and stuff like that. And I will 100% admit that the Wix tool set will allow you to build the smallest and the best installation packages, but you have to work for it. There and everything else we've been working on, but it's getting like Wix 4. We've added a number of features. I have a number of ideas for Wix 5 to make it even better. So I may keep just coming back to your project as a little project that is nice because it's different. It's not a shortcut. It's not a service. It's actually a COM registration thing, which is still an interesting space to hook in to Windows and extend. And just like keep coming back to it in Wix 4 and go, look, we've been able to delete this many lines of code from Tim's project, so it's now this long. And then come back at Wix 5 and go, look, we're able to delete Tim's code down to this much until the point at which you look at it. And my goal is that when you look at it, if you don't know the Windows installer, every single line, you're like, yeah, I couldn't remove that or I wouldn't work.
Right.
I would love to get to that point. It is not that today. Today, if you look at it and you know the Windows installer, you know that's everything you need for it to work with the Windows installer. But there will be some things that you have to know why they exist in the Windows installer, why Wix is doing them. Because we want to provide you that extreme find control for. I mean, that's why the Wix toolset can build Office, right?
Right.
It can be the foundation for building those things because it allows you that deep control. All right. That's a fast rundown through that. Let's go ahead and open. I'm just gonna, I don't know who to open this in. What I call it foo. We'll open it Visual Studio and see how Visual Studio does with it. Been using Code a lot, but I'm really not happy with Code's XML editor in general. All right, so the decompiler essentially did the exact same thing that we did, except it went through all of that tables and everything and said, all right, let me give you the Wix elements for all of those things. So we're going to see a lot of.
So it not only decompiled, it transpiled basically.
It decompiled. It decompiled it back to source code.
in Wix format, serialized.
Because Wix is 100% MSI. We can represent everything that's in your MSI. Okay. It's not a transpile. It is the source code that we had in the past. We had some unit tests or integration tests that used to build Wix, compile a file, decompile it, and then compare the source code to the original source code. And if you're okay losing all your white space, right, and you get machine-generated decisions as opposed to human-generated decisions of code organization, it's 100% here. That was the intent. Now, we haven't become as strict about that because, honestly, dark and decompiling is generally used for migrating from previous installations to new installations, and we now have tools that help you migrate your Wix source codes. We have a tool that will convert this. For example, you could take this and feed it through Wix 4, and it will turn this into Wix 4 code, right? So it'll try to reduce and simplify and make everything work in Wix 4 syntax. So we don't say go through the decompiler. Don't take your MSI and decompile it into Wix 4. We're like, no, get your Wix source code and then bring it over. So the end result is that decompiler has become more of a tool to bring you in from other technologies, for example, exactly this case, and just to get you started or see what you got and things like that. So the Windows installer is extremely hierarchical. Lots of this, owns that. And so the Wix toolset has laid this out. There's also a couple decision points in the Wix toolset. You can choose how you want to organize your code. And so we can debate the different ways of doing trees and how you want to lay out your hierarchy. But this is everything that was in your MSI before. And if we just drop down, oh, I lost line numbers. Tools, options. Where'd my line numbers go? Line numbers. What? Oh, space. Please, text editor. Show, line numbers. Where are my line numbers? I must be missing no? Where's my line numbers? Okay.
That definitely feels like a bug.
I don't know where it went. It's like, show line numbers, and then they're not. Oh, maybe it's an XML, maybe. But I said all. All right, let's look at XML real quick, because it will be, I said everybody, but XML said no. Okay, there we go. Now we'll be able to talk a little bit more coherently about what this is. I'll bump the size up a little bit more here. All right, so down here are all these sequences, and one of the things that, I don't know, I'm going to jump around a little bit. All right, so one of the things that drive the Windows installer is these sequence tables that you put all their actions in. The named ones are the standard actions, and you can see a custom action slotted in here. The Wix toolset keeps all of your or the decompiler keeps all your sequences in case you made them in a specific case. In general, you don't specify any of this, and you just let Wix handle all the numbers for you because we know what the standard ones are, and we don't need to keep them in the code. So eventually, we're going to delete all of this. Oh, I didn't look. What kind of UI do you have or want for this install? Because we're going to see a lot of dialogue stuff here next, and that's why I'm kind of asking.
It was all the default Battleship Gray,
Well, that's what you get with the Windows installer. So
yeah, I don't need anything fancy.
Do you have any questions you want to ask? Places you're like, hey, no, I want to let you do, I don't know, customize the install location or anything. You're like, no, it just goes here. It's good, done.
I think I think I allowed the install location. It shouldn't matter in this case, but.
So in a lot of cases, I'm kind of of the mind like, just if there's no value, then just don't. Just be
there really is no value. Yeah, and it's small enough that it's not going to fill any disk.
Yeah, that's another thing. All right.
Yeah.
Then we'll probably go back and find a standard Wix UI for you, and we'll just drop that in, and then we'll get rid of all this UI stuff. So the Wix toolset has libraries, extensions that you can reference in, and they have pre-built. That's how we have all our pre-built stuff. The same as like C++ libraries, right? You just reference this library and pull. You bring a bunch of code in. All right, so I'm not going to worry about most of these things until we get to the custom actions. But I think we're going to find that, those. Oh gosh, this syntax. Yeah. Okay. Controlling, I guess this is, they're controlling this is your custom action that was doing the install and uninstall custom action to, call into your internal code, and they're conditioning it based off of the component state, which is, it's the right thing to do. It's just, the data-driven way would say associate this custom action with. Never mind. I'm not going to go into that. It's not a digression. We don't need it now. We're not going to worry about that right now. All right. So I like the upgrade at the top. I think Dark has ordered this alphabetically or something like that. All right. So let's go up here and look. Product ID. So you're probably just doing major upgrades.
Yeah. Yep.
So we can get rid of this. Now in Wix 4, I would be deleting this completely. In Wix now, in Wix 3, we put a star in there to basically say, hey, Wix toolset, you generate that GUID for me. I don't need to worry about that. I don't think we need to specify our code page. Language is English. The manufacturer is not Heuer, it's Tim Heuer. The name is the code file preview handler. That's great. These are all things that end up showing up in the add remove programs, right? What do you want to show? And then we have our upgrade code. The upgrade code is, I don't like the braces as much myself personally, it doesn't matter. Upgrade code is the one GUID that we will need in all of Wix toolset. A lot of people complain about Wix saying, oh, there's just too many GUIDs. And generally that means they're doing it wrong. If they have too many GUIDs, it means they're putting too many GUIDs in, or they've migrated something really old and they've had to keep lots of backwards compatibility and they had to keep all these GUIDs the same. Overall, you shouldn't have lots of GUIDs. But this one is very important because this one says, this is my family of packages. These guys are all related. And with the help of the upgrade element, we can say, I remove older ones than me, and newer ones than me don't remove or will. And if I try to install and there's a newer version of me, block and tell the user, hey, you can't install an old version. You have a newer version on your machine already. All that kind of stuff together, right? And then we're going to need to get your version going here because you probably aren't version 1.0 forever and ever and ever, but we'll come back to that. For now, we'll drop as 1.1. All right, package comments, sure. Yes, you clearly went through and filled out all of the blanks.
That tells you how old it is. Vista and Outlook 2007. Bam.
Is that true? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it works for anything now, but it was actually, this preview thing was a feature of Vista.
Oh, it was, sorry. I was like, wait, your MSI was a feature? No, it's the preview handler was a new thing. Yeah. All right, we'll just take that for now. Okay. I guess we'll make it compressed for now. We don't need languages, we'll inherit that. We don't need manufacturer, we'll inherit that. We don't specify platform like that anymore. Okay. And you said you want to do major upgrades. So we'll do a major upgrade. And we will not allow that. And we'll have a downgrade error message. A newer version of, we can use, this is the syntax to say, hey, go give me the product name of this and put it in here. So if you ever change that name, you don't have to change it here. It is already installed. All right, what does that do? That gets rid of all of these things here. So that's syntactic sugar by the Wix tool set that creates several little upgrade elements behind you that says, hey, I will automatically upgrade any version before me. All right then, so now we have our binary files, of which I don't think we're going to need. I hope we don't need any of these.
Well, the install util, right? That's the one that you're hoping to...
Yeah, that's one I hope we get rid of.
Okay.
So if we're successful, we don't need any of these. If we're not successful, then we won't get there.
Mm-hmm.
I usually like to go to a new GUID and an extra row in the upgrade table to remove a legacy and new / directory break free of old component sins. Yeah, I think we're going to see. I think we're doing early major upgrades that I think we're going to be fine. So I don't think we're going to end up needing any of this, but just in case, we're going to comment it all out and we will delete it later. Well, I mean, we will need... Yeah, see, default banner actually came from them. Yeah, we're gonna have to put your custom JPEG in the right place and things like that, but that's later.
Yeah, and we can even skip that. I mean, that was just me trying to be fancy, but
fancy.
I don't.
Okay.
I moved on from fancy life.
Yeah.
Simple is better.
Simple is better. Oh, okay. So now this is a pattern I don't like. This is a pattern that obviously some tools choose to use, but it's not one that I really like. Here, target dir has a very special place in the Windows installer. It by default gets set to the largest drive on the user's machine. So if you have, three drives and your D drive is the biggest, target dir when you're installing will get set to d:\whack. So by
Really?
default, all of these files being inside this directory here would be installed to d:\whack. Now, that's clearly not what's happening in your install because there's a custom action somewhere that is setting target dir during the initialization to say, hey, change target dir to this. So if we go up and search for target dir,
Looks like line
it's
20,
right there.
yeah.
See, it's right there. So essentially they're saying during the initialization of your MSI, I'm going to run this value that says assign this variable this value. So it's going to take the square bracket syntax, resolve all those things to program files folder, yay. Manufacturer, which is specified whatever value is there, and then product name, which is whatever you have in product name. Stick all those together and say I'm going to set the target dir to that location because the Windows installer will allow you to treat directories the same as properties, like assigning values. You can assign values to them. There's a couple limitations to that, but that's essentially what it is. But this essentially says, hey, let's run some tiny little bit of code in the Windows installer to configure this value, as opposed to how about we just initialize the value to the value it should be, right? It's like, here, let me say, var x equals 0, or no, sorry, int x, and then later on you say x equals 0. You're like, you could have just put that all in one line. So it ends up being a little bit more Wix code, but it also gets rid of custom action and it makes it, it shows you where it's at. So I'm going to go ahead and create your directory tree right here. Directory ID equals, and we use the syntax files folder. All right, now this is one of the things I don't like about Wix 3 that we have tackled in Wix 4. In the old days, program files folder you have to know is actually a built-in one in the Windows installer. It will resolve to, hey, guess what? Program files folder. Surprise, surprise, right? So in Wix 4, we've changed it so that instead of specifying target dir, you could just say standard directory, and then you can specify program files folder, and it's a enumeration of all the options. So you have standard directory, then you can put your custom directories inside of that, and it works way, way better. All right, so directory, and then this is, so where do you want to install it? Do you want to install it to program files folder, Tim Heuer, yada, yada, yada?
Yeah.
Okay, you want to keep the Tim Heuer thing in there. All right, so.
That's where the royalties come from, Rob.
Oh, see, me and not thinking. All right, I'm gonna duplicate it here for now. Man, I'm really working hard not to put time. I can't tell you how hard. All right.
And so manufacturer folder is also like a well-known name as well.
And this is why I wish we had done this differently in the Wix tool set. Manufacturer folder is our own name. So you have to know which ones are standard Windows installer ones and which ones are your own. And so I guess if you want, we could change this to dir, if you prefer, so that we don't use the word folder. I've gotten in the habit of using the folder syntax everywhere, just because that's the way I've always done it. But if you prefer, we could say manufacturer dir, so the dir ones are not Windows installer ones because none of them end in dir. They all end in the word folder. Maybe that'll make it look. We'll go with that for now, right? Product dir. Actually, we're going to change this. No, we're not going to change it. We're going to leave it like that. Okay, now I'm cheating here. There's another way to do this. We'll come back to it. I don't want to throw this concept in now, but there's a way that we would not have to duplicate these and in the code, but I don't want to throw that in quite yet. For now, we're just going to duplicate them. So here's your little directory tree of directories, and this is essentially your entire directory tree, right?
That's
program files folder.
Yep.
Tim Heuer, code files, this, and product dir is the ID that we will reference code file preview handler everywhere else. So you can think of this as like the variable name for this directory. We will use that everywhere we want for saying, hey, this is for product. This is for code file preview handler and all these things. That's what that specifies there. All right. Now we have all these components. Now historically, and if you go look on the internet, everybody puts their components in their directory tree. And that's a completely reasonable way to live life. You can say, hey, these are the components that go into these directories. let me step back real quick. Components are the atomic unit of install in MSI. Why they chose the word component is, I don't know. It's because everybody was using the word component back in the late 1990s. So components are very important. They group your resources together so that they travel together throughout the world, and they have lots of characteristics that are important, especially when we start talking about the register keys and things like that. So for now, because we just have these files, we don't have to worry about them too much. Putting a separate file in each component is a good idea. Now, we don't need the bitmap, right?
Correct.
Let's get rid of that. And we don't need the ICO file.
Correct.
Get rid of that. All right. So now we have these 2 components left. So I'm going to go through. Dark is extremely pedantic because it wants to make sure it translated exactly what you had in your MSI. It's possible that we should give it an option to not translate every single thing, but I'm going to remove a bunch of these attributes that are essentially are the defaults, namely the key path. There's only one file in here. This file provides the version. This file with a version will provide the version for this component. It'll determine whether this component and all of its contents are installed or not. If a newer version of the file was on the machine, that component would not be installed on the machine, right? It would say, hey, there's newer stuff. This is important when you start doing COM things and you start putting things like in common files folder, as Office did a lot, that when you had a newer version of the file, you didn't put that file there and then put the old registration on top. So you'd put your registry keys in your file together, and that would provide a version all together inside a component. Does that kind of make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It makes less. A lot of people are like, that seems completely unnecessary, and they're kind of right in a world where everybody just installs to new folders, or they don't ever overlap or anything like that. But the Windows installer operates in a world where you may choose to overlap, you may need to, and you may have multiple versions operating in all kinds of sharing scenarios that and it will help you, and this is a very important part of that. Anyway, we don't need short names anymore. That was oh gosh, is that a Wix 2 thing? That was a Wix 3 thing. I forget. You don't need short names. And you definitely don't want to give them names like this, because that's what Windows would generate for you. Anyway, short name. You probably don't need this file actually hidden, right?
I don't. I saw that and I was like, I wonder why I did that. It may have been just a default because it's a ref assembly or something. I have no idea, actually.
Yeah, okay. That's really strange. All right, so assembly.net is usually the way you say, this is a .NET assembly and I need it to go into the GAC. You don't need it to go in the GAC, right? Well,
no.
I could tell because you have all this assembly manifest stuff. Yeah. None of this is necessary to do. And then we don't need disk ID 1 anymore. So remember when I talked about the Windows installer being designed in the 1994 to 1997?
Mm-hmm.
Office still shipped on like 40 floppies at that time. So you needed to have separate disks for all your stuff. So you needed a way of saying which disk was this file on, so it could prompt the user and say, user, please put in disk number 28. And we will pull the file out of the cabinet on that disk for you. Far less of an interesting problem. That's why in Wix we just defaulted to disk ID 1 and say, you know what, we're just going to put it all in one big cab. And in your case, it's not even going to be a thing. All right. And then there's the source, and the source is very important. We'll come back to the source. This is the location where that file was extracted when we did dark, but we're going to pick up the one from your build instead. So we'll fix that in a little bit. I'm going to leave it wrong for now to come back to it. All right, I'm going to do a quick sweep here and do the same thing to this guy: key path, short name, assembly manifest, disk ID, delete all that stuff, delete, 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 delete. All right, great. And then same with this thing. Delete a bunch of things that we don't need. Delete, 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 delete. Done. All right. Now, the Windows installer tracks components not by their ID. This is in their internal variable name, but because components are registered globally across the entire machine, you have to know. And that whole sharing scenario I talked about before, where, hey, maybe this is part of we'll just go use Office example, part of Word and it's part of Excel, but it's a shared doohickey in between. Well, you need to know somehow that this file and all this component, all of its constituent reg keys together are on the machine or not. And they chose to use GUIDs for this, again, because it was the mid-1990s. The Wix toolset can now generate the GUID for you. We can just leave it off completely. The tricky part is that you can't change the GUID of a file without, because once you ship that component, it's a contract. It's a contract. So
it's a permalink.
Yeah, it's a permalink, except it's a permalink to say, hey, look, if I have this component and then I install that component again, if the GUID is different, but they both install the same file, the ref counts will be 1 and 1, because the ref count is on the GUID, not on the file. So if you uninstall one of those products, that file will prematurely be removed. The other component will know it's broken, you can fix it, but you've broken it because you broke the reference counting by changing that GUID. Now, this is only a problem if the files exist on the machine at the same time. If the components can exist on the same machine at the same time. So we can remove the GUIDs one time here and try to get through your upgrade scenarios, and it should all just work, because you're just going to basically remove the old version and install the new version. The Windows installer will do all that for you.
Right.
There is a chance in that sort of configuration where the user will remove the old one, install the new one, fail to install the new one, roll that back, and you end up with neither on the machine. Your install shouldn't be that complicated. That should be a very low case. And this is the simplest, that upgrade is the simplest one to schedule. You can also schedule them at different places, like at the end, where it's like, cool, install the new stuff and then remove the things before. And there you're dependent on the file versions and the GUID staying the same. So if the Windows installer is like, yes, this file is newer. Oh, nobody refers to that file. I can delete it. So you can, change the contents of your MSI, but you have to be very careful to know that all your files and the versioning are correct as you go through there, right? So one of the things that we do in larger projects, especially in larger projects, are things that are much more sensitive. Who loads this? This is a preview handler. It gets loaded by Explorer, right?
It's a host process, not Explorer directly. It's called preview host exe.
Right, but it will get loaded by that thing.
Correct.
And that thing doesn't have UI.
Does not have UI.
So, interesting, because when you're installing, the Windows installer will generally say, hey, these files are still in use, you need to remove them or whatnot, right? Or you need to close this app and things like that. But it'll only do so if it can find the app and give a window to tell the user to close that. If there's no window that they can tell the user, hey, remove this, they don't give you nearly as useful specifics. It's just like, hey, you need to stop things or we're going to restart your machine.
Right.
And you're probably going to want to avoid restarts as much as possible. One of the easiest ways to avoid restarts, always, is to always install into a new folder. Because what will happen is your old version will be held in use in the previous version folder, and then when you install the new version, it'll lay its files out in a new place. And because they're not trying to write to the exact same location where those files that are currently running, loaded by Explorer, loaded by Outlook or whatnot, then it can actually lay all those files down, it can register everything, and then the Windows installer can say, oh, I'm going to remove all these files. Oh, they're in use. I'll just leave them there and schedule them for removal whenever the user reboots again.
And they would be, this is the, like, if I have program files /v1
yes
list of binaries, and then you have v1.1
yes
stuff. I see.
Yes. And so it just avoids a huge class of sharing problems in there. It also has a nice side effect that when we install these files to a new folder, we can change all the GUIDs because they're new files, right? The files are in a new folder, therefore foo.dll in folder A is different than foo.dll in folder B. Even if it's the same contents, they're in different locations. I remove them independently. They can have different GUIDs, and that's okay.
Right.
They could also have the same GUID, and Windows installer will know which one's which and remove the right one, if it really is the same file. But in this case, if you change the version, we definitely don't have to worry about the GUIDs for this particular go-around at all. And you may find that that allows this to install a lot better even when the files are in use. Should we try that?
Yeah,
okay.
Sure. Yeah.
So I'm going to insert another directory. Chris, I didn't make install location a public property because Tim said he didn't care about making it configurable. So, and I'm inclined not to do that. All right. Okay. A little hesitant doing that, but because I'm gonna have to remember to come back and fix it. All right. All three of these, I want to remove the duplication because these essentially are duplications of your manufacturer, your product name, and now your version.
Okay.
Oh, in fact, I see, I already messed it up. 11.0. All right. So because we put it in a new folder, we can remove the GUIDs. Good. All right, so now that we have these components defined inside the directory tree, you can kind of see it's like, all right, here's my directory tree, and then there's a bunch of files mixed in, and then here's the rest of my directory tree.
Does the source in the file still need to be there then too?
Oh yeah, very important. Let's talk about that. I've left it at this location to say, hey, this is where it got extracted to. We need to update this to point to the actual binary. Because remember, one of the things the Wix toolset's going to do is create a cabinet for you, because you're going to said compress all this. So it needs to know where the source of the file is to put it into that cabinet.
Okay.
Now, I'm going to say one thing. You can specify the source. There's a number of different ways of specifying the source, all depending on the way that you want your build system to work, because everybody's build system is different and the way they layout files is different, all that kind of things. The Wix toolset is very flexible. So when we get to that point, we'll talk about how we choose to put them together, organize them. All right, so then let's see. I don't think you need program menu folder or desktop folder. You don't put anything in the start menu.
No shortcuts, no.
And you don't have anything on the desktop.
No.
So you were given these two directories for your Windows installer to register and evaluate every time, and then you never use them. Again, it's like setting variables that you didn't use later on. And their compiler chose not to remove it. Okay, so what's next? All right, now we're looking at the feature tree. All right, so the Windows installer has two structures as things work up and down. One of them I like to consider, I kind of liken it to the physical system. So you have the directory tree, which provides the skeleton of your package. It says where files are physically laid out, as close to physical as there can be, laid out on the machine. Features are more like the muscles or the nerves, probably more like the muscles. They are the things that you can change. Like the user can configure them to turn things on and off, so they can move around the stuff that's in it. So you have these two trees, and as you can imagine, in the directory tree, we specify where the components go. Components go into directories, so you have to specify where in the skeleton the components hang out, and then you also have to specify what parts of what parts can the user control to move the components around during the install, right? So we have to reference these components in two places. Now, the way they've done that, the way Dark did it for you was, hey, I put your components and I specified them underneath the directory tree, and then we create a component ref here to those component names and say, hey, this component is part of this feature. Now, in your case, you're thinking, why do I care about features or any of these kinds of things? Because you only have one. And if you go back again to 1997 and you think of Office, and I say 1997 was with design, it was done by 2000, right? It was Office 2000 that it finally, everything kind of came out. But you could think of the Word feature, the Excel feature, the Access feature, so on and so forth.
So
right?
do you have to have one of the, like...
Again, the Windows installer today requires you, the Windows installer requires a feature, yes. And the Wix toolset wants you to be very specific about what your feature is and all the things it can be in. It's not going to make V4. I really wish it make V4. I really wanted V4 to make feature optional. And we would just add one for you if you didn't.
You would just
specify.
implied, like
exactly.
Nothing specified. There's one.
Exactly. It's just not going to quite make it. So it'll be 5.
Okay.
But there's a number of things in 5 that I'm hoping we can do that too. So you can organize your components however you want. Now, I think the directory tree is more important than the feature tree in general. And unless you're going to have many features, and you can have, when you get larger, you can end up with like components that are shared across features, like something that's part of both Word and Excel. I'm using Office example. You started there, so I keep going back to it. Like you can have something that's both part of Word and Excel, so that component would be both in Excel and in the Word feature. So if you turned off the Word feature, the Excel feature would still have it, right? So you have all that kind of control. In your case, you have one feature, you're only gonna have the components defined in one place. I think it's a lot nicer, instead of having your directory tree muddied up with all the components, I just pick them up and I drop them in here instead. Right, to say there. Now you can just say, here's my feature, it is, the contents of it are these components. I find that a little bit easier to read.
I see.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, because we did that, we don't need to refer to these components by ID anymore, because before we had to have that component ref.
And that was the only thing that was mapping them.
That's the thing that was mapping them together, right?
Okay.
So now that we don't, it's like, you know what, I don't need this to be set to anything, so just, that's fine. I'm good. I'm good. Wix, take care of that for me. There will still be an ID. You can think of it like an anonymous lambda or whatever, right? It's like, yeah, there's code behind it. It's named, things can call it, all that kind of stuff. But you don't really care, so let's just remove it. The same goes for the files too. I think I'm gonna hold off on that. We may need to refer to the files, but it's the same thing. If we don't end up anywhere going, hey, I need the path to that file, we can just take it out of here too. And that'll solve that problem. All right, now the one downside.
I think the first two, we probably will not need that, just FYI, but
okay,
when we cross that path, right?
Yeah. So now the downside is you still have to specify the component has to say which directory it goes in. Now, because we've moved it out of the directory tree, we still have to say where it goes. So now we have to add the directory back, and you can do that. There. Now we said these components live in these directories, which happen to be the same one.
Now, can you scroll up all the way to the top of the file?
Sure.
You had one, so on line 6, a newer version of bracket product name, which refers back to something.
It's a variable reference. Yeah, it's like in C++ it'd be like star product name. It's like, give me the value of product name.
Okay, so now if you go back to where you were just typing and you just added, directory equal version dir, why not, like on line 49, why is that not in brackets to say, hey, refer to this other thing? It's going to be looking up IDs anywhere? Like that's unique?
Because the Windows installer won't resolve the variable there.
I see.
The Windows installer has places where it will resolve those variables and places where it won't. And this happens to be one of the places where it will not. So if I put...
I'm only thinking from a readability standpoint.
Absolutely. No. Yeah. All right. Let's do this. And my syntax is always fuzzy. I never remember the syntax, which means it's not good enough, but it is what it is. So if you did this, the name of your directory would be square bracket product version.
Yeah.
Right. Which is fine. All right. So in the Wix toolset, we have compiler variables. So to help you while you're doing work, we have variables that we are managing inside the system. And some of them are very late bound. So you can think like at link time, at very, very late. So you can do this bang question mark syntax. And I'm going to get it wrong because it always takes me a second. I think that's it. All right. So what is this saying? This bang parenthesis syntax is saying, hey, Wix toolset, when you get to the linker and you're like putting the MSI together at the final part where you figured out everything that's in the code, can you go find me the property? Because we have this well-known like lookup system, and we say, hey, can you go find me the property and give me the value of the property name product version? So this is I don't start here. This is not the most obvious thing, but I always have to go look at the syntax because the syntax might actually be a little bit wrong too. That's why I always have to go double and check it. But what happens is then the Wix toolset during build time, when it compiles this, will replace the value of product version that's going to end up inside your MSI inside this slot. So it's a build time replacement, not a runtime replacement.
Right.
Which is the same as you typing it in by hand.
Yeah. Okay.
And then that's what this is. This one, we just do the same thing. I'm doubling down on my syntax guess. I really should just memorize it, but you do this once and then I never go back and do it. So it's not good. I don't do this enough. And there, bam. So now I've gone off and said, give me these properties and put their values in here. And you don't need a runtime anything. It's all done at build time for you.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right. So now I want to show you one more syntax here. because real quick, another one you can do. This is not as obvious for you, but you can imagine as you get bigger, you might want to organize your components into groups, arbitrary groups. Component groups are not a Windows installer concept. They are a Wix concept. They are an arbitrary grouping. They do not end up being anything in the Windows installer, right? It's just an easy way to say, I've got a bunch of components here, and then you can do something like this. Component group ref ID equals components.
Got it.
All right. So you're like, all right, cool. Why would I want to do this, right? Well, now let's take this moment to go do the thing that we're going to do, and we could then add a new item, a Wix file, v3 installer file. That's great, and we'll just call this components.wss. And what is this? This is what we call a fragment. You can think of it as like a function call. It's the way I like to kind of think about these. And what have I done here? I've taken that one big file and broken up into separate files. So here I can look at, and these are my components. And the Wix tool set will do the work when you compile to find your,
we're in food,
yeah. To find your entry point, find your feature, know this is a component graph, and then go find the correct file it needs to and compile that and bring all that contents in and hook it all up for you.
Cool.
So it allows you to take, I see people with like 500 line WXS files, and I'm like, why are you doing that right? It's like, you wouldn't write, well, maybe they write their C# C code, their code that way too, right? They make gigantic functions. I like to write them smaller, okay? Your project is so on the borderline that separate files may be overkill, but maybe not, right? It's like, I don't know if this makes it, is this clearer for you? Does this help? It's so small. Oh, the other thing that component group will allow us to do is to bring a default directory onto it, so we would get rid of all these guys. So you can see now we reduced our syntax. And if we get rid of the file IDs, we're eventually just going to end up with file source with the correct name on the source, and the file name will be the source, because typically whatever's a source, that's probably the name you're installing it with, so you don't need to specify a name. And so you just end up with this inside your component group. Imagine that 3 times. And that's it. That's what you got. Yeah. And you can put it in a separate file, and you're like, there, those are my files. Now, in something in the case of Office, you have thousands of these for all the different things that go into Office.
Yeah, and I can imagine like segmenting teams and stuff like that, where they manage their own.
Right.
And in some ways, this is exactly what VS does, right? Like,
absolutely. And then you can go next level. You could take this and put it into a library. So now you can take and just have your own little project that you compile into a reasonable thing, and then someone else consumes that and makes a bigger thing with it. Or maybe, again, like in the case of Office, may build several different SKUs with different things in it and picks different libraries and different stuff in and out as they go. Right? Like they can have content shared between Office the client and Office SharePoint and libraries. And then when you reference it, the nice thing is that only the content inside a fragment comes in. So I could have another fragment down here with stuff in it, and that would not come in. The stuff in this fragment does not get included in my product if I don't refer to anything in it. So it allows me to group like but disparate parts into a single file and only get the parts that I want included in the final product. Again, it's all just code organization.
Right.
What is the way you want to make your code look? And our goal is to give you the flexibility to organize it in a way that makes sense, so you don't have to end up with one gigantic 500 line file.
Makes
Again,
sense.
Yours is borderline not needing it. So it's your call how you want to do it, and I'll leave it that way.
No, it's cool. I like the fragment approach.
All right. And you want the components? Like, do you like that file name? I just picked names. There are your
that's
names.
fine. Yeah. That maps well into mind.
All right. Components. And of course, in your case, you only have one, so components is fine. If there were different things, you might need more names.
Right.
All right. So
and so that is that ID then looking for components.wxs now?
No, it is looking for component group components.
I see component ID.
You could call this x.wxs. It doesn't care what the source name is.
Okay, that's just an input to the build.
Yeah, it's a file. What you need, the file name doesn't matter in the end except for error messages.
Okay. Yeah.
File name and line number, that's the only place that matter. All right, great. So now here's the other thing. Okay, so we don't need a configurable directory. We're not doing that. I think level 1 is the default. So there we could trim all that down. Okay. Another thing that I like to do is I like to take my directory tree and toss it in another folder called folders.wxs. But again, I call them or directories.wxs because you don't need to have them in this file because something's probably going to refer to them, and then you can suck them in and you only get the ones that you need.
Okay.
Right. So it's up to you. Again, it's like, do you want to see your directory tree inside your product or not? Personally, I think that it's kind of like I like having my directory tree in one place, and I can just see it like, yeah, that's the directory tree for my product. I don't have to jump into the product, and because there might be other stuff in here, but it's totally a personal preference. Again, it's like you write your main function your way, I write mine my way. You know, a lot of cases when I write C#, I have a main function that ends up calling a run, like creates a new program and then program.run. I don't put much code inside main, but that's just the thing I've always done. Does it matter? No, not really. It's just a code organization thing.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll keep going. Oh my goodness, look at all these properties. Hiding in here is an important part. I always put my media at the top as well. Wix has a media template, which I think we can default. So we could just take out all of this there. So media template essentially will say, you can set thresholds. You could say, if my product gets, or I don't want any CAD to be larger than 500 megabytes. And then it will split your content across that every 500, roughly content input gets to 500 megabytes, starts another cab, another cab, another cab, another cab. I think 500, it's 200. I'd have to go look again. Somewhere in that range is a really good number for cabinets, it turns out. If you get much bigger than that, cabinet just kind of like the size of the metadata takes longer for it to process. So that 200 ends up being kind of a good size. None of that's relevant to your product, but it's a thing. So you can just drop media template in here, and the end result is that we're going to get one cabinet. And in this case, we're going to embed it. So we'll have one file. The MSI will have the cabinet embedded in it. If we don't add embed cabinet, then it will create a cabinet outside. All right, so there's a few more things we'll want to do, but all right. So when I'm looking at all these properties, there's just a bunch of, okay, so there's this ARP stuff. Okay, we need to bring the ARP stuff out. ARP is add remove programs.
Mm-hmm.
So the things that you show up. All right, I'm looking through the rest of these. I don't think we need these. These are the messages. Yeah. Really? This framework version is 2.0. Yeah, okay, it's old. This setup requires Internet Information Server 4.0 or higher and Windows NT 4.0, Windows 2.0. Seriously?
It definitely does not.
Yeah, this again is a template providing a whole bunch of stuff in your things. All right, yeah. I'm inclined. I'm just going to take all these things out. We can always go find them in the original MSI if we need them, and not worry about them. All right, now we get into the UI. Dark just dumps all the UI for you. Actually, there's a switch I forgot Dark early enough to that it would have fragmented for us. It kind of guesses a couple things. It's like, oh, I'll put the UI over here and things like that. I didn't run that switch usually because I want to save the fragment reveal for a point in time when it makes more sense to talk about it. But that would have cut all this UI stuff. Now we're gonna get rid of all the UI, so it's just like I don't care, dialogues, controls. The Windows installers has a declarative way of putting controls on the screen, and it really does end up drawing all the Win32 controls for you automatically using all this declarative system. And we did not do a whole lot in the Wix toolset other than to make that stuff's available. So it's a whole lot of just junk that I then delete, and we will go pick a standard. In fact, let's just go do that right now. I'll bring up a browser real quick and we'll go Wix UI extension. I think that'll take me to the documentation. No, that's not the one I want. Why did it not give me Wix built-in UI dialog sets? Way too long. All right, so it provides a few. I think we can just go with minimal. That's the one. Don't show anything. So we'll just go grab.
When you say don't show anything, I mean it shows like the splash, but no options.
Yeah. No. Nothing, as in not a whole lot. Okay, UI.
I see, and that's a known moniker. All those ones that you just showed.
It's not a known moniker. It's a known Wix extension that's provided. So now, thank you. Good plant.
Okay.
Projects, extensions. Where am I? This is very strange. Normally this leaves me in the location where they're all at. Program files, Wix, bin, and then we want the Wix UI extension. TTTTUUUI. There we go. Add. Okay. So what we've done, we've basically said on the command line, this will add a line to the build. It will bring this thing in, and when by saying UI ref, we're going to do exactly what I talked about before. There, if you go look at the Wix code, there's a fragment that contains all of the Wix UI manual. We wrap it up, put an extension. That extension has other functionality in it. It can extend the compiler, do all kinds of cool things. In this case, all we want is that UI, so it pulls all the content you need, and poof, you have a whole UI inside your install. So that's nice and easy. All right, and we're going to keep these ARP components. These are standard Windows installer defined things that end up showing up in your UI, except we have to fix the icon. Do you have?
Is there a default one? Can you just say?
Oh yeah. Do you want just the Windows installer icon to show up? Oh, okay.
I could care less about any branding on the UI. Yeah.
Wait. We went through all this trouble to put the manufacturer name up here for branding purposes.
Only that part.
That's fine. All right, so you'll get the standard one then. All right, fine, done. We could also pull it out of your DLLs and stuff like that, so that's fine. All right, this is good. I am changing this to, I change this to Windows and Outlook preview handler for, there we go. And actually, yeah, okay, that's probably okay. Should I double down on it?
I was gonna say, you should double down. You're hesitant on your.
It's just my syntax. I'm always forgetting my syntax here. Yeah. It's purely I remember the syntax
right away,
right? Yes, and then I'll have to go search the internet to remember the syntax. It's like, it could be lowercase p on property. Like, I'm waiting for Bob to jump in the comments and tell me what I got, because he might have looked it up already. Anyway, the thing is that I don't know that, is ARP contact the same as manufacturer? Are those, you see what I'm saying? Like, is the manufacturer the ARP contact, or is the ARP contact Tim Heuer? And when you sell this for $1 million to New York Times, is it then something else? Like, do you want those tied together? And again, it's a coding decision, right?
Yeah. I mean, in this instance, they are the same, right? So.
And so if you change in one place, you want them changed in both places.
Yeah.
Okay. So then let's do it. That's what he said. Okay. Now this one is interesting, because this is the same as the comments you put in here. Now, normally people don't bother filling in the package comments, because these are like what happens if you right-click on the file and you go look in details.
Mm-hmm.
See, Bob jumped in the. You can't see the chat, but Bob did jump in the chat, and he's gonna see. I thought you wanted the surprise. It's lowercase p. Bob's always looking out for me, making sure I can look like a fool before saving me. It's all good. All right, and then you know what? We're just going to take out the rest. So the rest of this is all this custom action goo, which I'm going to drop this down there too. Okay, so I'm going to take all of this and slam it over top our template, because we don't care about our template now. Although this template's, if we look at it real quick, you can see it looks a lot like what we were just doing here, except this template gave you the component group ref. We're trying to nudge people into fragments. That's why the template kind of throws fragments in their face right at the beginning. And as it shows here, you can put the fragments in a single file. And in the end, this is the same as if you wrote product from the top to the bottom, or whether you put it in fragments and whatnot. It's the same. This organization is the same. It's very similar to whether you write a main function that is 29 lines long, right? Or a main function that is 12 lines long, and two functions that are 5 lines long. Which way do you write that code? I don't know. It's up to you.
Yeah.
When it's this small, I can't really make a judgment call either way. It's totally your decision. But when it gets bigger, you definitely want to start finding fragments. All right. So we're going to just nuke this, put over top the damage I've been doing to the foo. And so we're in 28 lines up here. Yeah. And that's that. So do you want to break this out into a folder, or do you want to keep it here in line?
Yeah, let's keep that one there.
Okay. Done. I think we are now at time to do our first build. We're gonna get.
You gotta
errors.
change the lowercase p.
No, I'm gonna do it the right.
Oh.
I'm not going to remove Bob his pleasure of watching me fail. All right. Now there are a number of things that were expected to it. So we have these errors at the top that are cannot find these files. So that's expected. So we're gonna have to solve that problem. Did we get other errors? So we have a bunch of warnings from your code of old WIT code, which I don't think surprises you. And then, because it can't find the files, we didn't get far enough in the linking process to find my P thing. So let's talk about the files real quick. Focus on this one file. All right, so you can specify the path to files in the source, and that's totally a valid lifestyle choice, kind of, we'll say. Oh wait, I need to name back. All right, there. I realized I deleted the name, but it still had this ugly name over here. Okay, I need to know who's who, although it doesn't matter now. It didn't even matter. Okay, whatever. All right, we need to go find these files. So one of the ways to do it is to specify full paths. And if we look at the command line here, we will see these -d here. Oh man, that's really small. I don't know if I can make it bigger. Here, I'm just gonna grab the command line. Okay, so you see these -ds here. These are preprocessor defines that you can use in the WIS toolset. And it turns out we have a bunch of them. Come on, push the right keys here. And you can see some of them are paths to things, and so on and so forth. And the most common thing is people find these and they're like, oh, that's clearly the way that I want to refer to my files. So you can start seeing here, I have project path, I have target dir, and so on and so forth, target extension, output. And well, let's go down here. Notice here now, it's also added code preview handler dot. So because we have that project reference, the WIS toolset is giving us defines across that project reference to say, hey, if you want to refer to properties from that other project, here are a few that we gave you, like code previewed platform, the project dir that it was built wherever it's at, the CS, the project name without the extension, the project's path, the target dir where it was built to, the target extension, target file name. If you've done MS Build, you probably recognize a bunch of these. Yeah, there we go. And then now we start getting to the rest of Wix stuff. So all these -ds in here, right, are variables that people like to use to then go off and refer to the other project. So we can, let's go do it the way that everybody does it. Then I'll show you the way that I like to do it. So we want the code preview handler, right? What is the syntax for the preprocessor variable? Remember I was talking about the, oh, right, I'm at the bottom here. Okay, C# format. So remember we talked about the bang parenthesis syntax to reference everything. There's also the preprocessor syntax. So the $var, the $var gets replaced during the preprocess phase. So even before compiling, you can think of that variable gets replaced with whatever that -d was in the source code as the compiler starts running. Okay, so these can be based off things outside of the source code. Then the preprocessor allows you to bring them in. You can also do env here and bring on environment variables. In this case, we're doing var.this because we saw that it was passed on our command line, and that's giving us the full path to the thing that project that we referenced. Boom, done.
But it's giving you a path to only one of those files.
Correct.
So not that one. No,
oh, not that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of them, but not that one. The bottom one, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And now, because we know it has a file name on it, if we want to change the name, we should give it a name. If we don't want to change the name, then let's not change the name.
Okay.
Okay.
Cool.
So there. So from the outside in. Now these other guys live inside this folder, right?
They would, yes, in the target.
Yeah. So they live inside here. They live inside the libraries folder.
Right.
Ta-da, there they are. So we need to refer to those. So what is that? That's the project folder.
Oh, I see. Okay.
The project.
But you could also go like
projector.
target dir here, because they're going to be copied there.
Oh, are they?
You could do either one, right?
Okay. Well, so now you don't have to copy them necessarily if you don't want. Yes, but you are exactly right. Now you get to choose which way do you want to refer to them.
Okay.
Now, the fact that they are copied makes me want to do it the other way even more. Okay, so where is that? Target dir. Your code, your idea, we'll do it your way. Totally happy with that. And then we'll put the name here. Bin debug. Okay, yep, that.
Then you need the var in front of it, right?
Oh, yes, thank you. See, you're getting as good as Bob here. Keep you around. In Wix 4, you don't need the var. We made it look more like MS Build syntax. So I've been writing too much Wix 4 lately. Mm-hmm. The var is now optional in Wix 4. The idea being to make it look a little bit more like MS Build.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that totally works, right? And you can kind of be like, yeah, okay, actually, I say that. Let's go ahead and build and prove. Not valid. There are multiple root elements. Oh, sorry, I can't leave it. I knew I couldn't leave this here. Build. Output. I wish that window was bigger. Output. It worked. At least it says it worked. Since we're here, let's always do the thing we always do. Orca. All right, let's bring up Orca. All right, we now have 28 tables. I didn't look. What did we have before? Yes, I'm flexing a little bit, but this is what we do. Compared to 88.
Okay.
All right, so what do we have? Admin execute sequence, admin UI sequence. These are standard, nothing special. You got minimal UI, so you get what you get there. Advertise execute sequence, that's correct. And then we have some binaries. These are for all your different
that was from the default
UIs.
UI.
Yep, yeah, from the UI. Oh, a license. We'll need to go specify lines. Okay. All right, and there's our 3 components. Notice the names are all funky because we're like, yeah, you just take care of it, Wix, and it did. Here's our 3 files. Notice it generated short file names that are not going to collide with what the operating system might have created, which creates all kinds of really funky problems when it happens. It almost never happens, but using that tilde syntax, technically speaking, could collide with a file that's already on the system. Mm-hmm. No reason to do that. So there's your 3 files. Yeah. Our upgrade, all that kind of good stuff. We still have, also look, we have no registry table. So this is one of those things I look at and be like, this MSI installs files.
Yeah, it's a glorified file copier.
Exactly. Let's just pop it open real quick. Nope, that's not the right one. Not that one. Bin debug. Oh, setup. Setup. There we go. Bin debug. Good. Notice it's laid out the same as anything else. All right, so we'll want to replace the license, accept, and then install. So you now have one way in. All right.
And can you opt to say no license?
Yeah, we'll have to go look and see if we could do that. I don't remember off the top of my head how to get rid of that. Or how hard it is to do that. Okay. We did the bind syntax. Oh, we should look. I didn't double check. Orca. This one. It keeps opening up on my other monitor for some reason. We look at our directory table. Look, see, there it is. See how it gave us the variables are replaced at build time. 1.1, code file name, Tim Heuer, right? And these other funky names are the short file names. Mm-hmm. The Windows installer, having built back in 1994-99, requires short file names for everything. Whether you like it or not, the Wix toolset takes care of that for you, though. All right, so there you go. 11, code Heuer, Tim Heuer. All right. what do we want to tackle? We don't have time for the registry thing. We have to come back to. Can you come back next week?
I'll have to check, but
we might have to do that.
Okay.
I don't know if it'll take us the full 90. We're not gonna have time. So let's see. I want to do one thing. So we were already talking about this bind syntax, and now we have this version number. And if we look at your file that you're building, how do I want to do that? So many options here, too many windows. Let's go. Start bin debug. All right, pick more. I want to see file versions, please. File version. Ta-da! File version. All right. So that. All right. So your managed preview handler has a version number of 10000. All right. So you'd probably want to change that as time goes on, and do whatever automation you want to do to update that. But it would be nice if we didn't have to specify the version number in multiple places. It'd be nice, since this is, or no, sorry, not that one, this one, code preview handler, not the managed preview handler. The code preview handler's version. It'd be nice if you could just change the version of that and have the whole system use it.
Right.
Oh, wow. Code preview handler file. All right. We're going to give this guy an ID. These guys don't need IDs. At least they don't at this point. We might have to give them one night. We're going to give this guy a handler. Now, this syntax I also don't always remember, but it's very similar. Did I slide that off too far? There you go. Bind. Yeah, let's go ahead and wrap this real quick. Oh, it did. That was nice, Visual Studio. Thank you. Way better than VS Code. All right, there. Version. Let's see if the syntax is correct, but I think it is. Let me make sure I don't have the MSI open. And if we build this, we'll find out. It'll tell me if I got it wrong. Go, light, go. The linker's building, Boom. So remember when we authored it, it was 1.0110, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if this worked, then the new MSI, really wish shortcode to remember where I left it off, we'll say that it's now 100.
Nice.
And the product version and our property is now 100. So all you have to do now is remember to update your file version, and your MSI version will follow.
And that flowed to the directory too, right? That was the first one you looked at?
And it was in the directory too.
Yeah. Okay.
So now you specify it one place, and you're done. Now, it's kind of funky. I mean, you could say, all right, why are you using property product version here? You could just use this, but I think this is clearer. This is whatever the product version is, use that. And then this could change to different files, or if you change the file ID, you'd need to change this, things like that. So I would organize the code this way. But again, you could instead use this here and say the version dir is the version of that file.
I see.
And because of that bang syntax, that bang parent syntax, that means very late in the build process, after it's calculated everything, it has access to these variables and it can drop them in for you. Where the dollar syntax is at the very, very beginning of the world, where you have preprocessed variables usually coming from the outside world to affect what comes in.
Sweet.
And I'm just going to delete this because if we need it, we'll go back and get it later. So there you go. That's 30 lines in here. And you've got your little block of component here. And you now have an MSI that installs your files but does not register. And we need to talk about registration, because that's actually going to be tricky.
And tricky in the sense because of how the code that I have.
Yeah, well, yeah, because we have to figure out how to get the real quick. We'll poke ahead here. Code handler installer.cs. So what you're doing is you're calling registration services, easy for me to say, to register the assembly and then unregister it. So it's basically going out and getting those keys. And when I attempted to bring these registry keys in to to acquire these registry keys at the build process instead of during install time. I hit a null reference exception in your code saying that the managed preview handler, the one in libraries, that this managed preview handler was having a null reference exception. So whatever code was in there was unhappy with what we were trying to pull the registration out of it. And I don't know if it's happier when it's actually installed and it works there, or if you're going to find that it also fails on modern operating systems. I don't know if you've tried installing it lately. Have you tried?
Yeah.
It still works?
It still works.
Okay, good. Well, that's good. So at least we have it. Worst comes to worst, we'll just watch it and we'll grab all the registry keys and we'll pull it all together. I mean, there's different ways that we can handle this. So it's certainly not the end of the world. It's just, for whatever reason, this thing is making it a little bit harder to solve that problem. But we'll pull out. And that's the big next thing.
Cool.
So a good start. And do you want this now? How do you want this, Tim? Do you want me to send a PR or something like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think you can even, like, since it's not fully complete, like even just a draft PR, right? So that we just kind of like track the progress.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll put it up in a PR, and then I would not recommend taking it in yet.
Yeah.
Although it doesn't do anything wrong.
No.
So if you want
and actually, the interesting thing is, for me, like, I could even mess around with that and try to learn, automating this. And
you'll have the pull request. I'll let you do what you want with it.
Yeah.
You're the owner of the repository, so it'll all work for you. So there you go.
Sweet.
Well, Tim, really appreciate you coming on. This is fun. It's nice to kind of take a simple project. I was poking around and finding lots of complex ones, but this is a nice, easy way to start from the ground up, take something out of Dark and show how you can start with Dark, delete a whole bunch of stuff, and then get something much simpler. Admittedly, you have to know what to delete, which is probably you could do. The whistle set actually helps quite a bit. You can just like, hey, delete this. If you compile it and the whistle says, no, you need that, you're like, all right, I'll put it back.
Right.
But there are a couple of tricks and things in here also that hopefully give you a nice block of code that you can start with. And then you can organize how you want, things like that. I will get this up and send you the source code your way. Very cool. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. This has been fun. I'll be looking for more people to do this throughout the year. We'll see if Tim comes back and we try to tackle his registration depending on what he decides to do. If not next week, maybe the week after that, or sometimes later than that. We'll find our way through. There's options. It might be a fun thing to tackle. Until then, I'll be back next week with something on the agenda, depending on Tim may or may not be here with me, but that's all right. We'll make do without him. Or maybe he'll just come in and become a regular and hang out and listen. We got some good tunes going around the back. All right. Until then, you guys have a good time. Keep coding. You know I am. Bye.